Welcome to Ctrl+Talk. This is Anthony, and I'm here with Kate for a deep dive into the history of Firefox. You've sent us a bunch of articles and research on the topic, and wow, it looks like we're in for quite a ride.
It is a fascinating story. I mean, think about it. Firefox's journey is basically a mirror of the internet's evolution. We're talking like innovation competition and
Okay.
even like a bit of a David versus Goliath battle.
Okay, so let's fire up the time machine and head back to the early 90s. Remember when the internet was this like new uncharted territory?
Hmm.
That's where our story begins with a guy named Mark Andreessen. He was a student who ended up creating one of the very first web browsers that people actually wanted to use.
Yeah, it's interesting here that before Mosaic, using the internet was a pretty clunky experience. Imagine trying to like read a website with no images, inconsistent layouts, and menus that looked completely different depending on your computer.
Oh yeah.
Andreessen saw the potential of the web, but he knew it needed to be easier for everyday people to navigate. So he and his team created NCSA Mosaic, which was like a revelation at the time.
It was basically the gateway drug to the internet for a lot of people, right? Suddenly, you could actually see images, click on links, and explore this whole new world online. Mosaic made the internet visual and interactive. But then things get really interesting. Andreessen teams up with Jim Clark, and they form Netscape with this ambitious goal of creating the Mosaic killer.
And they weren't messing around. Remember that Godzilla-like mascot they had in the early days? That pretty much sums up their ambition. Their creation, Netscape Navigator, really changed the game. It wasn't just about visuals, it was about making the internet consistent. Before Netscape, you had to wrestle with different interfaces depending on whether you were on a Mac or a PC. Netscape said, nope, the internet should look and feel the same for everyone.
So they basically laid the foundation for the seamless web browsing experience we take for granted today.
Exactly. And their success was explosive. Netscape's IPO in 1995 was legendary. They were like the undisputed kings of the browser world, at least for a while.
Until a certain tech giant decided to step into the ring. Cue the dramatic music. Here come the browser wars. I bet you remember those days. Netscape versus Microsoft, a battle for the soul of the internet.
Oh, yeah, it was a classic David versus Goliath situation. Microsoft, with their massive market share of Windows-bundled Internet Explorer with their operating system, suddenly millions of people had IE right there on their desktops. Even if they preferred Netscape, the convenience of having IE pre-installed was hard to beat.
That must have been like a frustrating time to be at Netscape. You're innovating, pushing the boundaries, and then this behemoth comes in and essentially throws their weight around. What were their options?
Well, by 1998, it was clear that Netscape was in trouble. They needed to do something drastic, so they made a move that would change the course of internet history. They decided to open source the code of their browser suite Netscape Communicator.
Hold on. They basically gave away their crown jewels. Why would they do that?
It was a risky gamble, but they were hoping to harness the power of the open source community. They knew they couldn't beat Microsoft in a straight-up market share battle, so they decided to open up development to the world. The idea was that thousands of developers could contribute to improving the browser.
That's a pretty radical move. What was the thinking behind that? Were they hoping to create a kind of grassroots movement to take on Microsoft?
There was definitely a sense of idealism involved. But it wasn't just about altruism. Open sourcing the code was also a strategic move. They knew that a diverse community of developers could innovate faster than a single company, and that by making the code freely available, they could attract top talent and potentially gain an edge over Microsoft.
So this is where the Mozilla organization comes into play, right? To manage this whole open source project.
Exactly. The Mozilla organization was formed to steer the ship. Around the same time, Netscape itself got acquired by AOL in a mega deal worth billions. It was a wild time in the tech world, that's for sure. But the story doesn't end there.
Because out of the ashes of Netscape Communicator rises Firefox.
Right, but it wasn't like a smooth transition. The new browser project, built on the Gecko rendering engine, initially went by the codename Phoenix. Then trademark disputes forced them to switch to Firebird, which also ran into legal issues. It wasn't until 2003 that they finally landed on the name Firefox.
Wait, wasn't there another trademark issue with the name Firefox?
You're absolutely right. It turns out there was another Firefox out there, and to avoid any more confusion, they went ahead and trademarked the name Mozilla Firefox instead. Talk about a naming saga.
It's amazing they managed to find a name at all. But they did. And the rest, as they say, is history. Firefox became hugely successful, especially with versions 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0. Those releases were packed with innovative features. For a while, Firefox was the top dog, surpassing even Internet Explorer. People loved its speed, its customization options, and its commitment to user privacy.
And a big part of that success was due to Firefox's plugin ecosystem. Remember how you could add all sorts of extensions to customize your browsing experience? That was a huge draw for a lot of users, especially power users who wanted more control over their browser. It set Firefox apart from the competition.
It was like building your own personalized internet experience. But then a new challenger appeared on the horizon, a little something called Google Chrome.
So we lit off with this new browser called Google Chrome, about to make a big splash. This is back in 2008 when Firefox was riding high, enjoying its time at the top. And then Chrome arrives with this minimalist design, blazing fast speeds, and the backing of, well, Google.
It was kind of a perfect storm, right? The timing was impeccable. People were starting to get frustrated with some of Firefox's performance issues, and Chrome just felt so clean and snappy in comparison.
Exactly. Chrome was built on this new rendering engine called WebKit, which was really efficient. Think of a rendering engine like the interpreter between the code of a website and what you actually see on your screen. Chrome's engine was just better at translating that code quickly and accurately.
So it was a bit of a wake-up call for Firefox, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. Chrome's arrival really marked a major turning point in the whole browser landscape. It forced Firefox to kind of reevaluate its strategy and figure out how to compete in this new, faster-paced environment.
And this was right around the time when smartphones were starting to take off. That must have added another layer of complexity to the whole browser game.
Absolutely. Suddenly, it wasn't just about desktop browsing anymore. People are accessing the internet on their phones, and that created a whole new set of challenges and opportunities for browser developers.
So how did Firefox respond to this double whammy of Chrome's rise and the mobile revolution?
Well, they didn't just sit back and watch their market share disappear. They released Firefox 4 in 2011, which was a major overhaul designed to improve performance and catch up with Chrome in terms of speed and features. They also started developing Firefox for Android, recognizing the importance of the mobile market.
But even with those efforts, it seems like Chrome's momentum was just too strong. Did Firefox ever manage to regain its lost ground?
It's been an uphill battle. Chrome's integration with Google's other services like Gmail and YouTube gave it a significant advantage. And let's face it, most people just want a browser that works. And Chrome did that really well.
It was simple, reliable, and it just worked. So where does that leave Firefox today? It's still around, but it's definitely not the dominant force it once was. What's Mozilla's strategy now?
Well, they've shifted their focus to some extent. They're still trying to improve performance and keep up with Chrome in terms of features, but they're also emphasizing privacy and security as key differentiators.
Yeah, I've noticed they've been talking a lot about ethical design and data protection in their marketing.
Wow.
Is that resonating with users? Is privacy becoming like a bigger selling point for browsers these days?
It's definitely a growing concern for a lot of people. We're more aware than ever of how our data is being collected and used online, and there's a segment of users who are actively seeking out alternatives to Chrome that prioritize privacy. Firefox is trying to position itself as the go-to browser for those users.
Makes sense. If you're concerned about Google's vast data collection practices, Firefox might seem like a more trustworthy option. But they're not the only browser out there focusing on privacy, are they? What about Brave or DuckDuckGo?
You're right. There are other players in the privacy-focused browser space, and that competition is actually good for users. It forces everyone to up their game and offer stronger privacy protections. But Firefox has a long history of advocating for user privacy. They were one of the first major browsers to implement features like tracking protection and anti-fingerprinting.
Speaking of history, I can't resist circling back to that surprising fact about the Firefox logo. It's not actually a fox, right? It's a red panda.
It's true. And that little detail actually ties into a bigger conversation about Firefox's identity. They've always been a bit different, a bit more quirky than the other browsers out there. They're not afraid to stand out from the crowd.
It's like that red panda.
Yeah.
Adorable, but also fiercely independent.
Exactly. And I think that sense of independence is what continues to draw people to Firefox. In a world where a few tech giants dominate so much of our online experience, Firefox represents an alternative. They're a champion for the open web, for user choice, and for a more decentralized internet.
It's a powerful message. But is it enough to ensure Firefox's survival in this increasingly competitive landscape?
That's the million-dollar question. The browser wars might look different today than they did back in the Netscape era, but the stakes are just as high. It's a battle for the hearts and minds of users, for control of our online experiences, and ultimately for the future of the internet itself.
So what does that future look like for Firefox? Can they carve out a sustainable niche in a world dominated by Chrome, or are they destined to become a footnote in internet history?
Well, I wouldn't count them out just yet. They've shown a remarkable ability to adapt and evolve over the years. And as we've seen, the browser landscape can shift quickly. New technologies emerge, user preferences change, and opportunities arise.
I guess the only thing we can say for certain is that the next chapter of the Firefox story is still being written.
And that's what makes it so exciting. Stay tuned.
It's really striking, thinking about everything we've discussed, just how much Firefox's journey mirrors the broader evolution of the internet. We started with this kind of like wide open frontier, a sense of endless possibility. And then came the consolidation and the rise of these huge tech giants
Yeah.
and the battle for control. And through it all, Firefox has been there, fighting for a more open, user-centric web.
Yeah, it's a constant push and pull. I mean, we've seen the pendulum swing back and forth between openness and control. And as technology advances, as we move into this world of AI and the metaverse, the stakes are only getting higher.
So what can we as individuals actually do to support, a more open and diverse internet? I mean, beyond just like using Firefox, of course, what actions can we take to, actually make a difference?
That's a great question, and it's something we should all be thinking about. Supporting open source projects, both financially and through contributions, is definitely one way to make an impact.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a coder to contribute to open source projects. There are plenty of ways to get involved, like documentation translation, or even just spreading the word.
That's a good point. It's about creating a culture that values openness and collaboration. What else can we do?
Well, we can also advocate for policies that promote competition and protect user privacy. Contact your elected officials, support organizations fighting for digital rights, and make your voice heard. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of these massive tech companies, but collective action can make a real difference.
Absolutely. And on a more personal level, we can be more mindful of the choices we make online. Which browsers do we use? Which search engines? Which social media platforms? Every click we make, every piece of data we share, it all contributes to shaping the internet.
Awareness is key. If we don't understand the implications of our choices, it's easy to get swept up in the convenience and slick marketing of these walled gardens that the tech giants are building. We have to remember that there are alternatives and that supporting those alternatives is a way of voting with our actions for a more open and democratic internet.
Well said. This deep dive has been incredibly enlightening. We've covered so much ground from the early days of Mosaic and the browser wars to the rise of Firefox and the challenges it faces today. We've explored the evolution of the internet, the power of open source, and the importance of user choice.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey. And, I hope our listener has come away with a deeper understanding of the forces that have shaped the digital world we live in. And more importantly, I hope it sparked some curiosity about the future of the internet and the role we can all play in building a better web.
Me too. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the history of Firefox. It's a story that's still unfolding, and we can't wait to see what the next chapter holds.